my principal's very flexible. And so like my son had a field trip this morning. And so I worked, but my Tuesday classes I don't have classes on Tuesdays. That's just like work in the library day.
Oh man, I
or
wish.
or coordinate with teachers, because I co-teach some of my classes with the language arts teachers. So I can't plan that without them.
Right.
So I have to have time when they have planning time, which is usually when I'm teaching, to make those plans. So, but I was like able to switch it to yesterday so that I could go on the field trip today and do all those kinds of things.
That flexibility is just so wonderful. All right. Well, we'll just, let's see, it's 2 minutes after, so we'll probably just get started. Today, we are just going to start working through workshopping a little bit of our policies. And, you know, we're here just to grow together. Some of us have done some of this, some of us have not. Some of our schools have given us stuff. So probably, you know, take what you can use. And we are recording it. So if you want a chance to go back and look and like, what did we talk about? Just let us know and we'll send you out that recording, and we'll probably post it on that Facebook page again. We are planning to have Christina, which I think you can probably see there, give us most of the leadership in this area. I don't even have a policy at my school, and I think it would be awesome to have it. I just talked to my principal the other day about it, and he's like, yes, please. But he also is quite giving and said, you know, work on the next year. So I'm super happy to have a plan, but not a early deadline. So yeah, so I'm just going to turn it over to Christina, and thank you so much for being willing to do this.
All right, thanks. So when I started, I replaced my elementary librarian. And she had been there for well over 20, close to 30 years. But she only did pre-K through third grade. A kind of rotating group did 4th and 5th grade. And there were probably 5 different people within about 7 years. And then they hadn't had that program. And so she gave me this binder that had all of her directions, but she didn't do tech at all. So it had like handwritten notes. And so I'm going to share my screen just to show you kind of where I started. Oh, can you let me?
I was just going to say,
share?
I probably have to let you. Okay, try now.
Okay, there we go. Find it. Okay, so I was given this policy that is like 8 pages long. So there were her notes. Then there was our censorship guidelines, which, you know, are a lot. And then there were like specific issues and genre classifications that trying to explain it to anyone or even like figure it out myself was a lot. So my goal had been to update that. So this is kind of where I have gotten to. I'm going to show you, I have kind of a list of topics and where I got stuck. So that we can maybe talk through that a little bit. And I can show you kind of where I'm at and what I have. I've used kind of what I had been given along with, I don't know if any of you have seen this in the shared drive. I can't remember who shared it, but it was their selection policy.
Mm-hmm.
I think Lorraine, maybe?
Yes, Lorraine.
Yeah.
Yes. So Lorraine's school, this is their selection policy. So I was looking at that, looking at what I was given and kind of piecing it back together. So one of the things that Lorraine had on hers and we sort of had in ours was a mission. And so I think that one of the things that we have to start with is what is our school's mission or vision statement and how does the library fit with that? Because that's how we're going to be able to keep kind of all of the stakeholders involved. Because if the board for however long has picked this mission and vision statement, which ours has been around since the start of our school, which was over 50 years ago. And it's been the same. So it's been long lasting. So I'm going to show you that part of mine. Just a second. So our mission statement as a school is pursuing excellence for the glory of God. And then kind of how I see that playing out in the library is that we must recognize that God chose to give us his word in written form. To pursue excellence for his glory, we should be well equipped to handle the written word, to read the word, as well as learn about God, his people, and his created world. Because I tried to get a lot of those information literacy pieces in there, but connected to how that is us pursuing excellence for God, because that's what sets us apart compared to a public school library. So that was kind of where I was at, and I'm willing to share this with everyone. Once it's done, I'll make a copy and share it so that
That was
everyone
going to
can
be
see
my
it.
question.
Yep.
How much do I have to take notes right now?
Yes, I will share what mine is. I'm going to make a copy of it and I'll put it in the shared drive if everyone has access to that. And then this is one I wasn't quite sure if I should do or not, because ours has changed a lot over the years. Is, do you think that you would include what classes you teach in the mission or vision for your library? And I don't really have an answer to that one. So I would love to have some input on, do you teach classes? Do you teach technology and library? Do you only teach library? Because I think that makes a difference. So I do a story time with preschool, but because of where our library is located, they can't come to me. And then I do library class, but we have a separate technology teacher. So I don't do anything tech. I've got like 4 old computers in the library just for card catalog lookups. For K2, and then 3rd through 5th grade, I team teach with their language arts teacher. So there's all sorts of different, we all have different situations on how our is set up. And I haven't totally decided if I'm going to put anything about classes in there. We usually present it to parents at the beginning of the year. So right now, I don't have anything of that in there. So the next section that I had in there is selection criteria. And so these were some of the questions that I kind of came across. So what I was given was our censorship guidelines. And should we call it censorship, or is it really selection? And did that change how we write it? So is it we don't have these things in our library, or is it we want books that affirm our worldview? Because I feel like even when we talk to kids, it's better if we affirm what we want than just talk about all the things we don't want. So I want to choose books that affirm the character qualities in our honor statement: honesty, respect, integrity, diligence. So if the characters in the book aren't showing respect, or it's glorified to not show respect to adults, is that what I want to affirm in our collection? Does that make sense? I see some nodding heads.
To just say, I really like that. I think that that's so nice to put that in a positive bent. So that's definitely something that I think I'm going to carry through. So thank you for that.
And then I'm going to just go through these questions, and then I'll show you what I have kind of in my policy right now and the places where I'm kind of stuck. So the other thing that I saw that I really liked in Lorraine's was that they separated Christian and secular sources. And I think that we have to have a different standard for that, because if I'm looking at a book on planets, well, there's not really great books on planets that are Christian or states or countries or all of those things. So what I select there is different than, and then there's even everything that's called Christian, and does it really fit what our Christian standards are within our specific school communities. And so separating those, I think, is good. I haven't totally figured out how I'm going to do it yet. And that same with fiction and nonfiction, because it makes a difference whether it's stories or whether it is nonfiction factual information that we're looking for, and what is available for us, because there's just not a ton of Christian nonfiction. And then, do we have a committee to help evaluate books? I'm hitting that point where I can't read everything and almost everything needs to be read. But I also parent 2 small children and that only leaves so much time. So And then as our school, what is our community doing for whether, like what teachers put in their classroom libraries? Are they expected to follow the same rules? Because we have some teachers that do Wimpy Kid, but we don't have it in the school library. So what are the different, what are our standards across the board? And then I want to make a worksheet to help support that evaluation. So something that like, I can say, okay, if you read a book, fill this out on it. And if all the teachers are reading books, then we can create a binder that has all of the book reviews for all of us to see, instead of all of us trying to do it all on our own. And then have a general place that if you want information on a book, this is where we go. And kind of with the selection and censorship, what books are we prioritizing and purchasing? Because I think that's part of like, are we affirming certain things or are we choosing not to have them? But we all have very limited budgets. And so it's often more of a choice of what am I going to choose to get versus what am I choosing not to get. So in my policy, I had a goal, and this was part of what I had been given. And I like it and I don't like it. But our goal is to be as wise as serpents and as harmless as doves in attempting to blend literary guidelines that will produce a portfolio of literature that will challenge students to think while not offending the Christian standards that the school desires to affirm. Realizing that absolute agreement in the design of selection policies is realistically unattainable, Southfield Christian strives to develop guidelines that represent our Christian perspective, biblical standards, consideration of the weaker brother concept, and sound educational goals. So I like it. I think it's a little bit wordy to put forward in a like, here's what our policies are. But thankfully I was given a policy that included what would we do if there's a book challenge. So that is kind of part of what we have. So the first paragraph on here is, I don't know if can you see it? Is it big enough? Let's see if I can make it a little bigger. Is that a little better? There we go. So it kind of sort of outlines what we want to do. But my thoughts are that I'm going to give general requirements that books are to affirm both the doctrinal and lifestyle statements that are contained in our school handbook, that they affirm our biblical view of gender and relationships, which would mean not having it mostly in elementary school books, that they affirm attributes of our honor code, honor, integrity, respect, responsibility, and diligence. So those are kind of where I was starting as a way to pick out what I want, not just what I don't want. And then I was working through separating the nonfiction out. And so that it would first be evaluated by its contribution to the curriculum. Both Christian and secular nonfiction books are selected based on their subject content, age appropriateness, and quality of writing to create a balanced collection. If the primary topic of the book does not fit within the biblical worldview held by SES, it will not be selected. But then this is kind of like the caveat to that. Materials for selected topics may be accurate, but make small references to things like evolution. If the value of the majority of the content is deemed essential, a label will be inserted on the front cover, and that defines the school's belief statements on creation versus evolution, because our school is a creation kind of affirming church and school. And one of our former principals was a science teacher, a physics teacher actually. And so he wrote the statement that we use. I'll have to find it, but I have lots of copies of it. So I can include that too, of what the statement that we have. And it's something about like, in some areas of science, books are written that have value, but don't necessarily affirm all of what our school's statement is. And so, well, like, this is what we believe. We don't give full endorsement to this book, but it has valuable content in it, kind of thing. And then I'm working on the fiction part. So I kind of, this is the big pieces that were given to me, and I thought that they were just very, very difficult to understand, even for myself reading them, because they were super convoluted. So it was like life issues. So real life issues can be made mention of in the story. And so like the Bible contains things that it didn't affirm as good because it wanted us to show us what was bad. And so literature depends on inclusions of death, divorce, prejudice, discrimination, and a whole list of things. These issues are not always represented from a Christian perspective. And so, but these are things that could be included in our collection. And again, this was written probably 20, 25 years ago, at least. Because we've only ever had one book challenged in the elementary, and that was when I was in middle school. So, and it was, what was it? A Wrinkle in Time. There was a parent that just got like a spur under her saddle, and she thought it was all about witchcraft, and like gathered all of the other parents. And so that's why we have a very clear challenge policy. So a lot of these things I like, but they're just way too hard for anyone outside to understand. So if I was going to give this to other teachers at our school, they're going to look at it and be like, what on earth does this mean? So my goal is to kind of clarify that. I really liked, if anyone has it or can pull it up, Lorraine's does a really good job of making things very clear. Like, and one of the things that my principal is very big on is clearly representing good and evil. And that, okay, so if there's magic, well, there's still clearly the good guys and there's still the bad guys. So that's why, like for him, Star Wars is okay, Harry Potter's not in our elementary, because there's clearly defined good and bad, and what that means and the implications it has for students. So Lorraine's is very good. So I'm working on trying to take some of what's there, but hers is also middle school, high school, and kind of adapt it to what I need in elementary. So that's where one of the places that I'm kind of working through. Does anyone have any questions or kind of thoughts they want to share?
Christy, I'm glad you asked that question. The policy that I have at our school, I've been at the school for 24 years, 24 and a half, well, whatever, 24, I'm part of the woodwork. The policy that was written before that is possibly from originally when our school was built in 1941. So a couple of years ago, I went through and I said, okay, this no longer applies. At one point in time, you had to have a board member approve it, and you had to have this parent and that parent and, just other stuff. Well, the board has not, in all the years I've been there, the board has never said to me, you need board approval on certain books or, whatever. So what the former librarian did was she had a form, and I've actually kept it the same. I've actually kept the form, but it's a form I send with any books that I ask a parent to read. I have like 3 to 5 parents that read books for me. And, I can ask them, okay, considering this, we're at a Christian school. So, on some things we're a little, maybe I don't want to use the word more progressive because there's a lot of garbage out there I won't put in. But, so I'll say, okay, on the form, I'll tell them, language is always a one thing, nowadays, of course, they know anything, a gay relationship of any kind is included in that, witchcraft, fairies, goblins, that kind of thing. I'm okay with to a point. We have kids that love all that fantasy stuff. I have one child from the middle school that could not wait to get a hold of one of the old Brothers Grimm book, and took me weeks to figure out where it was. Here it was in my book hospital. Anyway, so we do have kids that are coming in and they want this stuff. Harry Potter, I have never put in for I know obvious reasons, like you just said. And originally when Harry Potter first came out, my thought was, one, you can pick it up at a local bookstore. You can pick it up at your local libraries. Two, honestly, my whole thing was when Harry Potter first came out, I don't need the aggravation from parents. So they have never been in the Star Wars or in C.S. Lewis is always being checked out.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I'm so irritated. I left my form of my response, this whole thing. I even made a copy of it and plan to scan it and send it to you ladies. And it's sitting on my desk. So I will take care of that tomorrow for you. So it's
Great.
another sample that, you ladies can look at.
Yeah,
Thanks for
we
being
do
really
have
thorough.
some differences, I think, too, in how we handle our middle school and high school library versus our elementary library, because we have our building we're a K-12 school, but they're kind of sectioned off. And so we have a separate library and a separate librarian that does that. And so she and I work together on a lot of these things. But she's also part-time and has several kids and is doing all of the things too. And she teaches classes because we do virtual classes through our state for some kids for classes that we don't offer. We don't have enough kids that would take them to offer them. And so she monitors all of the online classes and gives them grades on their report card along with what they're getting from that online class. So we both stay pretty busy, but we have some things like some of the Rick Riordan series. We don't put anything of that other than 39 Clues in our elementary library, but they have them in the high school library, but on a pulled shelf. So we do utilize that in some things. And it's in one of the pieces of the old policy. And that's something that requires parent permission or our knowledge of the parents, in the high school level. There's certain parents that we know where they stand on things because we have kids in the schools. And so we know what the parent, whether the parents are okay with it or not. And but there's one, some Mark Twain that we have in the elementary library. So I have them on a pulled shelf because I have a very diverse population. And so we have people with very different feelings on whether that should be in there or not. But the decision had kind of been that it's canon. So if a kid wants it, we have it available, but it requires, because of the language in it, it requires parent permission in the elementary level for them to read it. So we've done that a little bit with some things, but Kathy, a lot like you said, it's when the kids are like, why don't we have this? And I said, well, do you get it anyways? Well, yeah. Okay, so if you can get it at the library, or a lot of our teachers do the Scholastic book orders, or you can get it at the public library, then you have access to it. And your parents are buying it for you because it's on the shelf at Target and it's on the shelf here. And my goal is to provide you with things that you wouldn't have easy access to necessarily in especially fiction books, things that are going to be interesting to you, but I only have this much budget and there's all of those books. So I have to choose the things are the best quality for you to read. So that's kind of how I discuss it with the kids. Does anyone else have Jen, did you have anything to add?
I just am curious, how much language do you allow in different books? I feel ooh, this would be fine for an 8th grader and this would not be fine for a 5th grader. So I always kind of struggle because my library is K-8.
Yes.
So yeah, it's just a challenge. that we're
Mine
always
is
working through.
K-12. I just
Do
have
you
one
separate
library.
things by age level?
I have one shelf that's an upper reference shelf that has things about drug addiction and opposing viewpoints and stuff like that the littles aren't allowed to check out, but everything else is mixed. I mean, I only have one little space, so everything's together.
So I just pulled up my what I was given, and the language, what does it say? A worthwhile fiction book includes a character who utters a profanity is occasionally selected. Damn, hell, never anything stronger or more crude. And those are, for the most part, we used to participate with our local public library in a battle of the books, but they no longer do it, or things like Newbery Honor Winners. But we try to steer clear of profanity and never condone use of this type of language. I did have one interesting moment where I had a parent who apparently had never heard of C.S. Lewis. And when her daughter brought home one of the Chronicles of Narnia book, it referenced a donkey as an ass. And she's like, why on earth would you allow elementary children to check out a book that has this word in it? Like, well, it's kind of canon in all children's literature, especially Christian children's literature. And he was British. So just like in a hymnal, you would find, Christmas hymns that have, oh, and I was just like, I didn't realize that there were people that didn't have any knowledge of C.S. Lewis. So that was fun. I was like, oh, okay. This is why we have all of these policies.
Well, and it's nice when you can explain it that easily, right?
Yeah. But it's like, of all the questions that I would have a parent challenging me on, I didn't think it was me Chronicles of Narnia. So, let's see. So one of the things, if anyone has any thoughts on how to do a worksheet, Kathy, you said you'd share yours. Is that something, even if you like kind of nod or give a thumbs up, is that something that you've considered, or do you do all of the selection completely independently?
I do most of the selection. Yeah, for the most part, I'll say I do all of it. I do have parents that have donated, asked, hey, can we do it? We did an Usborne book fair a couple years ago. One of the parents at that time, she was an Usborne dealer, and I thought Usborne was reasonably a Christian company. And then I found out that the one book, after I had already stamped it, there was so much language in it, and
Can I ask which
unfortunately,
one?
it was a junior fiction. I don't,
Okay.
yeah, it was, I was really surprised, and so was she. And I
Mhm.
even called the Usborne company, and she's like, the lady I talked to just said, I will let them know about this, because apparently that one slipped through the cracks. So,
Okay.
I know Usborne has a lot of really good nonfiction.
Mhm.
So
We do a lot of their early chapter books too.
yeah, I like their nonfiction for the kids. Because I do preschool to 8th grade also. So, if there's any books I question, if it's something I can peruse rather quickly, I'll do so. But if it's any kind of chapter books, I send those home to parents that, otherwise it's going to sit on my list of, 300 other books I want to read. So and tomorrow I will not only do the policy, but if anybody needs the form that I use for parents, I'll be glad to
That'd be
attach a
great.
copy of that too.
Yeah.
That'd be great. I'd love
Sure.
to know how you get parents to say yes to helping you after like 3 books. Cause I got a lot of people that say yes to the first 3. And then after that, they're like, eh.
Well, a number of years ago, I got it approved that is like our school does points for the parents. They can either do hot lunch or whatever. So I got it approved that they can count their hours on reading books. So I do have
What?
certain parents.
You're so
yeah.
smart.
So yeah, so
I'm
I do
writing
have
that
certain
down.
parents
Yep.
that do it, and I've had other parents. I have a grandmother that told me, quite honestly, she's like, I would love to do it, but with the way her life is right now, she's just like, that book would sit there on my shelf for months before I'd read it for you. So I have some that are more than willing, and other ones that are not. They're willing, just honestly don't have the time. So yeah, I'm very blessed in that area.
Well, that was a great idea.
Yes. I love those parent volunteer hours. I don't know if anyone else uses library cards, but I've found I do card stock, and I cut it into 3s. and I have like kind of like a bookmark on the front, and it's their shelf marker and their library card. And we're working on self-checkout and kind of developing that. And so when I laminate them, I have different working parents that they take them home and they cut all of them out for me for all 250 kids. And then it's like, okay, that's done. Or even inventory, I've had some come in and they like just sit there and scan books for a couple hours. And that helps a ton. So in the policy that I was working on, one of the things I added, because I'm looking to try and add more people contributing to reading books, is school faculty and staff, because we have a lot that are readers and reading for their classrooms already. But I'm going to try and get a couple parents that we could get approved possibly, can fill out book evaluation forms that will be stored in a binder in the library. And the librarian can utilize those forms as a tool to determine if a book fits within our school selection policy and can be purchased for the library. That way, it's not like if a parent fills it out, that means automatically they like the book, it's in. But that way it's more of it's just a tool for me to use in what I am getting. So then the next part that we have is challenges and what to do if a book is challenged. And this is the policy that our school has had for a long time. I tried to find, but cannot locate the form that parents are supposed to fill out. So I have to ask our high school librarian if she has a copy of it. But our school has a very specific procedure that was laid out. So I'm happy to share that with all of you with this document. But parents have to read the entire book before they can question it. And then they can take it to and this is for like novel studies too, because it's come up a couple times in the high school with parents that didn't want their child to read. I think they used to do like 1984. They've done, some different novels that parents have decided they didn't want their kids to read. And before they can make that claim, they have to have read the whole book. They can't say, I don't want my kid to read it without having clear knowledge of what's in it. So then they are to meet with the teacher or librarian who is responsible for the book selection. The parent is to offer specific explanation with examples of why they feel the book is inappropriate. It's helpful if this is accomplished in written form. And it says, the thing I was given said C form, but there was no form. If the parent can be convinced of the appropriateness of the book, the issue is settled. If not, an alternative will be offered by the teacher. That's for like a classroom book. If it's not acceptable, the issue will be brought to the attention of the principal. So the parent will meet with the principal and teacher or librarian to discuss the issue in greater detail. The principal in consultation will render a decision. If the decision is acceptable to parent, it's settled. If not, it goes to the superintendent. So it calls it administrator here. And then the parent, principal, and the lead administrator discuss the issue in greater detail, and they will make a decision. If that's not accepted by the parent, then it goes to the school board. And then the school board has the final say in the whole situation. So that's kind of what we have. But I do like that the parent has to actually read the book before they can say. And sometimes if a parent came to me with something and it was just something I missed in a book, it's like, it's no big deal. I pull it from the shelf. But having that clear policy just makes everything simpler if it's a big issue. And then, so one of the other things that I'm looking at trying to do is working on my weeding criteria. And so when I inherited my library, we have about 250 students in pre-K through 5th grade, and we had like 9,000 books, or almost 9,000 books. There were over 1,000 that were older than I was. And really, like, not just fiction that was just old, but like nonfiction books on like 20th century technology or 20th century communications. Maybe someday we'll have touchscreens. And I was like, oh, okay. So we have been working really hard to get the library up to date, mostly by weeding and some purchasing. but we've been also we also had a much larger population. Probably 15 years ago, we had 3 sections of every grade instead of 2. And so you needed more books, but then they never got updated and they weren't getting checked out because we had just so much junk. And even now, still a lot of the books. So there used to be, and I'm trying to restart it again post-COVID. We used to do a birthday book program where people could donate towards a book. And then in that book, it would say like in honor of so-and-so's birthday, and it would have the name of the student inside the book on a little label. And when I was going through a bunch of them and, nonfiction books, and I was like, oh, that person graduated 5 years before me because I know the names of all of the students because I was there. I was like, oh, that might, they're in their 40s. So this nonfiction text about countries, well, that country doesn't even exist anymore. So maybe we can get rid of that one. So it's been a lot of that. Or I look at books and I'm like, oh yeah, I was a regular in checking out that book on ballet when I was in elementary school. Not a book like it, that very one. And that the kids are pulling out and, the pages are starting to fall out. Hasn't been checked out much because it's lasted for, 30 years. So it's one of those like, okay, I got to get things refreshed. And so one of the resources that I've looked at outside of, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the crew model. Let me see if I can get the tab to come up. There we go. And if you're not familiar with this, I'll add the link as well. But it gives super clear guidelines on what like an optimal library would have. Not anything near what I'm doing, but it kind of gives me a really good look at, okay, so if it's outdated, then it needs to be replaced. So that needs to go on my replacement list. But if it's fiction, then circulation is the more important piece than the copyright date. So if it hasn't circulated in so many years, then it's a candidate for weeding, as opposed to a nonfiction book that, depending on certain topics, and this breaks it down. I don't know if your schools use Dewey, but if you use Dewey, it breaks it down by the tens and tells you how many years each tens section, at what point it's considered outdated. And so it's different based on each one, which is really helpful because then I don't have to just like remember all of it.
So if I did that, my nonfiction would cease to exist.
Yes. That has been kind of we've been working on that. But so one of the resources that, as I've been trying to kind of advocate that I needed more funding, is, okay, so what is a baseline for a library? Like what would be, where should it be? Because there's just not much information out there, other than maybe sometimes you can get it like, how many books per kid should you have? Well, and so there's all different numbers out there. There's all different standards, but can you see the South Carolina thing? Oh, okay. So on this one, I found this, and I will add the link to this as well. It was really helpful because they were very clear at different levels what should be expected and what was considered kind of a basic library, an excellent, and an at-risk. And so my goal was to say, okay, so I know we're not going to get excellent. We don't get state funding. We don't get all of these other funding resources, but in some areas we're like exceeding, but in other areas we're really low. So how can we kind of hit a better middle ground? And one of those was by shrinking our collection some, then it's easier to keep up with turnover.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because we needed to fit our budget and our current student population, not the population that we had 15 years ago, pre-2008. So they go through and they give things like how much of your collection should be fiction and nonfiction at different age levels, which I found really helpful because we had way too much in some areas. Like our fiction section was really heavy, but we need more nonfiction. So then it's like, well, no, I'm actually like, I've been supplementing fiction by doing an Usborne Book Fair, by doing I-55, like I'm doing everything I can to supplement here, but there's only so much I can get in, like, they don't have country books. They don't have planet books. They don't have some of those things that I need to have a good curriculum supporting collection. And so this was able to help me say, no, I actually need more funds. Even if it's just, we have a donor who's willing to give $500. Okay, here's the thing on the list that of something that they can donate, we'll put their name in it and it will work that way. But so they go through at each grade, at each age level, how much should be updated annually. And so I've been kind of using this, aiming for the basic or to be between the at-risk and basic, just because of our funding for what my goals are. Not necessarily that it's all going to happen, but if that's my goal, then I know what I'm working towards, instead of just like, oh, I think we need this kind of book this year. Or I think maybe this is helpful. I don't know what collection management software do people use?
Libib.
Oh,
I use Alexandria.
okay.
I use Libib.
I use Follett.
Okay.
I use Libib as well.
Okay. So we use Follett, but I don't know if anyone has used Mackin as a supplier to order books from. I've really started to almost exclusively order from them. If you can get books and they're Mackin bound, they have a guarantee on the bindings, and they're typically cheaper than the library bound from everywhere else. And they include free processing. So they will send you the MARC record. They will label it with barcodes, with spine labels. They will do all of it for you. And it's still usually $2 or $3 less a book, which, and I'm like, okay, I can save my time on the processing. I can save my money. This is really good. But they also have a newer feature where you can upload your collection into it, and it will break down and identify for you which titles are aged, which things should be considered for, and it's free. You don't have to pay anything. So you just, they give you directions on whatever platform you use, how to download your file of your collection and then upload it onto their website. And they will do all of the like evaluation for you, which,
Wow.
you know, in like 15 minutes, if I can get an emailed PDF to me, that's great. So it's Mackin. And so that's been a really great resource that I've been able to use.
Tidal Wave also does that.
Mhm.
And I've used that one, but I think I'll look into Mackin also. That sounds great.
I like having both of them because you can set different standards for both of them. And then I can compare them and say, okay, if I'm really aggressive, this is where it's at. If I'm like super conservative, this is what books it's saying. So, and I can kind of use all of those tools together. And that's part of what helped me say, I really need funding for these specific areas because all of my Native American books were published in the 80s. I kind of need something updated, or and we use them. So it was like, this is a curriculum necessity for our social studies curriculum and the library curriculum. Like I have to have funds to get these books. And we had some extra in our budget this year. So I think also that relationship with your business office is huge. And whoever is making those kind of funding decisions. But so this South Carolina standards was really helpful because it said, you know, it's like, this is how much percentage turnover you should be updating each year. So, and then fiction, this is kind of average ages, nonfiction, here's average ages. And I think for most of us, we just don't have the funding to get anywhere close to exemplary. We just, you know, we're not provided state funding or federal funding for Title I or a lot of those things. But it gave me something to not just say it was from my mind, but this is what I'm advocating for, because this is a standard that we can use to evaluate where we're at. Does that help anyone with that part?
I really like that. That really helps me know where to go. I actually have kids that pretty much only read nonfiction, quite a lot of kids, which I think that's maybe not as typical as, I don't know, they just like only take out nonfiction unless they like put it in their hand. That's all they want. And it's pretty much all of my kindergarten through second graders will only really take out nonfiction. So it's nice to like, because I feel like, well, then I should be spending my money there, like if that's what they're actually taking home. So this gives me a little more like a balanced view of what I really need to do.
I feel like so much of what we hear kind of in librarian worlds is like, especially in some of, I don't know if anyone's part of them, the like bigger librarian kind of Facebook groups is like, if a book hasn't been checked out in 2 years, you just get rid of it. And I'm like, all right, there's no way, like, I don't have the funds for that. Like, or, well, you just keep getting the new, like, we'll buy out, like, where are you getting this money from? So
they're probably public libraries. I've worked there before too, and it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, it's like, this is not real life for a small,
Right.
a small private school. So, but having something to compare to that wasn't outrageous was helpful too. So then, this is something that I kind of am wondering about. We only charge fines at this point for books that are damaged beyond repair, like they're so waterlogged that I can't save them, or that are lost. Do you charge any fines for books that are damaged and require a significant amount of repair? So like I had one that was covered in food and I had to like go in and clean all of it off because it was peanut butter crackers. So you can't accidentally put peanut butter in the hands of a child that has peanut butter allergy. So I had to be really like diligent about cleaning that. Is that something that you've done? Is it something you've considered? And I was just curious if anyone has.
We used to when we use RenWeb as our fax, I guess, as our SIS, and we used to do our library through RenWeb, and then they quit supporting that. So at that point, it would go automatically to the parents if something was overdue. But you couldn't, or whomever was in charge of it, couldn't take into account weekends and days off, like school weeks off or whatever. And so people were getting nonstop emails about fines, and so they just turned it off. And I haven't been since COVID, and I lost a crap load of books to COVID, y'all. I'm sure everybody did, but they went home and nobody ever came back to school, and I'm still trying to get those books back. So, so we haven't been charging anything. I would like to at some point, even if it's minimal, just so that kids learn stewardship and being responsible for things that they borrow. But I don't know.
We don't do any overdue fines. It's only for lost or must be replaced because it was so irreparably damaged. And this is something that's been part of our school policy for a long time, is that any fines like that are applied on a student's account, it acts as if it was a like delinquent tuition payment. So none of their records get released to a new school or their report cards until those are paid. So, I mean, they could go on forever not paying them, but then they also can't get their report cards. They can't get their files to go to a new school.
That's kind of nice that your school supports you with that. Our school does like nothing. If someone loses a book, I usually just ask them to replace it or they damage it, but we don't have any real serious policy, and there's no late fees. I actually just got back a book, like it was the beginning of the school year, from someone who was just entering college. He cleaned out his room, and our school goes up to 8th grade. So it was good. I just took it and smiled, but yeah.
So I have it written in our policy that we charge fines, But and I've just left it in the policy, so it's there. But since I became librarian, I have not been charging them. I don't have, my system doesn't track how much it is, so it's too much work for me. And we're in kind of a tricky situation because at this point, approximately half of our school is voucher funded. So I think I could charge fines for some of those, but there could be some pushback for some of that too. But I definitely do charge for anything lost or damaged or that I determine we can't use anymore.
And in that, I a lot of times will tell the parent, you can probably get it cheaper on Amazon than I'm gonna replace it from wherever. So you can either pay for it or replace it.
That's what I do too. Rachel,
Yeah.
where are you? Because I'm in Iowa and they're thinking about like the voucher system is all going through right now here, possibly.
So it's kind of funny, Jen. I've seen, your name a few times and stuff. Are you in Orange City?
I am.
Okay.
I feel like I should know who you are, but I
Well,
don't.
I grew up in Sioux Center and I went to Unity.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
so we've
yes.
got that kind of that Dutch connection.
Yeah.
And I actually noticed your name. Sorry, hijacking here, but are you signed up on the Dork Discovery Days? I noticed your name for that
Yep,
as well.
I get to lead that, so that should be
Yeah.
fun.
So I may or may not have a child in there. We'll see.
Okay, well, I'll keep an eye open for them.
Thanks. But anyway, we live in Wisconsin, and our school joined the Wisconsin voucher program, which is relatively new to the state, and we joined it 2 years ago now. So our students who meet certain income qualifications can apply for a voucher and then get their tuition funded. And at this point, we're at close to half of our students who have that right now.
Okay.
So
Well,
kind of a unique
yeah, that's
situation.
interesting here. It actually might open you to a bunch of grants that you can get, but that's just my mind thinking because I did grant work before. So yeah, but that's neat.
Yep.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, no problem.
Right. So I think that's kind of the big things that I wanted to share. Is there anyone that has any kind of thoughts or wants to look kind of in depth at any certain part of the policy that I've been working with, or has any specific questions or thoughts they want to add?
Wow.
I will say I used to do fines when the middle school used to come into my room a lot more, like for study halls and stuff. But since that has pretty much ceased, and with COVID, I stopped the actual overdues, because otherwise I would have kids that were doing projects with the middle school teachers, and then the books would sit in the lockers for a month, and then they're like, "But Mrs. Rio, yeah, but your teacher told me 3 weeks ago you already turned in the report, it's graded." So, but I did quit doing that. But definitely missing books are a problem. Or had one, I have a Lego book that's been missing for a month now, and it was the first child to check it out, and he has no idea where his mom put it. And I'm like, great. And she won't answer my email to replace it.
I have one student that's had books out since September, and they've gotten an email every week.
Mhm.
And we're like calling home. It's just like, what? No, like I really wanted to use that book. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Peter Reynolds has a book called Gaiku, and it's all haikus for boys.
Nice.
And it's great.
Oh.
But I was like, I wanted it for Poetry Month, and it's been gone since September. So no one else has even had a chance to check it out.
Can you share again I know you said you're gonna put it in there, but can you show us that Texas page that had
Yes. If you just Google CREW, CREW,
okay,
and
that's
libraries, you'll be able to find it. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. Have any of you heard of like the musty rules? So it's essentially all of that, but they lay it out kind of bit by bit. So this was when I first started in my role as librarian. I I was like looking at all the books and I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. Like, how do I decide which books need to go and which ones need to stay? Because my background, I was a classroom teacher in social studies, and then I had a master's in curriculum. And then I started teaching library and I was like, okay, I got to learn this. So I went out and did all sorts of research. And this was one of the things that I read through to really kind of figure out what that even meant. What was weeding? There are a few YouTube videos, but not much for librarians. Because I'm a very visual learner. I need to see it. And so I was like, okay, is there any, there's not much out. But it goes down through kind of picture books, easy reader, juvenile, young adult fiction, and then YA, or in nonfiction. And it gives you very specific, let's see if I can find one of the pages. So, oh, here. So like simplified classics or abridgments, series books, older titles, what things you should be looking at. And then we all know the ones where you like open a book that's been on the shelf and apparently it had water on it and you stick your hand in some mold. I don't know if anyone else had that experience. It's like, oh, okay. There's a reason why this book hasn't been checked out for, 7 years, or 10 or 15. But it goes through all the different kinds of books. And then I think the hardest thing when I was going through trying to figure out, let's see if I can find one of them, is it uses these. And it has numbers. And so it's number/musty. So the musty is like moldy. It's outdated, but it's like that there's an updated copy or updated version. So one of the ones I found, we had like, when I started, we had 3 different series of Planet books. But because they all had very different copyright dates, they all had very different information in them. So when our kids were doing a project on different planets and they had to find the size of the planet, and every book that I had given them had a different number. So it was like, okay, it might be great to have 3 copies of books on Saturn, but if they all say different things, then that's not helpful. So that was one of my ways to like narrow that down. And then another thing that I use, and it's worth looking at what your state library has, because each state is different. But so I'm in Michigan, and our Michigan library has an e-library where we have free access to World Book through the state library as schools. And they have geotag IP or IP geotags. So if the IP address of the computer accessing it is within Michigan, it will allow them free access to those websites. And so then I can take those links and put them on my library website for the students to use. But they also, we have access to Britannica, some parts of Pebble Go, but that one I've struggled with. I don't know where anyone else falls on databases, but some of the content, especially the older grades, the biographies are a lot of like Ellen is great because she was an LGBTQ pioneer or different things like that. And so we've kind of stepped away from that and use that mostly just for like lower elementary science kind of things, which is part of what we get for free through the state instead of paying for it. So those are great to look at. But so these numbers, the first one is how many years a book is considered out of date in that section. So for law, if a book is more than 5 years old, it's considered out of date. Now, I don't go by those numbers, but it does give me a good look at what is more important and more time sensitive. So if I go down to education, which is 10, I know that that one is needs less refreshing. But something like planets, because we keep getting better technology, those keep updating. And so I need to update those more quickly. And then the 3 is how many years without a circulation. So if it's gone 3 years without any circulations in these kind of nonfiction areas, that's when it says it's a candidate for weeding. Not that you have to, but that's when it could be considered. And then all of those kind of other things like, is it moldy? Is it falling apart? Is it, we have something newer that precedes it. and is better to use. So does that help? I found this really helpful to especially, and then the in Follett, if that's what you use through Tidal Wave, the analysis that they do, or Mackin, both of them will identify those key areas that are most in need of updating. So I think in Follett or Tidal Wave, it calls them age sensitive areas. And then in Mackin, it's it just identifies age titles in different sections. Is there any questions or anything?
I really appreciate this that you're showing us now. To me, that really helps me have a picture of where I should start, because my upper, like junior high, middle school nonfiction is just mostly obsolete. Like there's actually a book that's over 70 years old that's never been checked out, that's still there. So yeah, there was actually a whole series of Native American books. That's that. And I was just like, I don't see why we have these. I think a new version is very much a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't keep them.
Yeah. Yeah, I did, when I did my reports, I did find one that had apparently missed my previous combings through. And then, so I've been in my job for this is my 5th year. And so I had 1 year that was like my first year. So everything was chaos. The second year I had major surgery and was out for 3 months and had come back in February. And so our high school librarian, we had 2 that both worked part-time, and one retired 2 years ago and the other one kind of took over that position. So one of them subbed for me while I was out for my medical leave. And then the next year COVID hit. And then last year was just like chaos of trying to figure out what was happening. And so I feel like this year I'm finally like, okay, I really have to get this back under control. But I found one book that had missed my combing throughs, and it was a 1941 publishing date. And I was like, oh, I really need to find where that one's hiding.
Yeah, there's only a few books like that you need to keep, right? Like
Right.
historical value or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if
Oh, Tammy, you're on mute.
Sorry. My dog was making noise. In one of the librarian groups I'm on Facebook, they have adventures in weeding, and
Oh,
it's
yes.
hilarious, the books that people post. But my other question was, I know that you are strictly library.
Mm-hmm.
One of my struggles, and I'm sure it's got to be others too, is I'm teaching all of the tech and all of the library, and I'm supposed to figure out what to do with the collection and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just not enough time in the world for all of that. So how do you, I mean, do you shut down to circulation at some point and say we're not having library anymore so I can get this done? Or like how in the world do you keep up with that and teach tech and library every day?
I was blessed in that the librarian before me had kind of set her own standards for how she wanted things. And that included that she didn't start classes for the first 3 weeks of school. I'm not sure why that one. But then she also closed 3 weeks before school stopped. And so I typically, because our school is laid out like strategically and operationally very interestingly. So our IT guy, who's kind of our head of IT, he takes care of all of the uploads of all of our students, because I don't have access to all of our student data in a way that I can download it and then upload it into our library software in their classes, and all of the usernames and passwords and all of that. So he does all of that, but it typically doesn't happen until the 2nd or 3rd week of school, which I think is why they didn't start library classes till then. I've used it to my advantage, and I start the second week, and then I can do all of my behavioral expectations before we even start talking about checkout. So we don't check out immediately, but we have library classes pretty close to right away. But because I'm part-time, it also is a little bit easier that first week, because teachers need a lot of different things and support for all sorts of different things too. But then we shut down. So one other policy that we have that is very helpful for getting library books back. I don't know what dress code policies you have. We have a uniform. And so the week before school gets out, so we always end on a Wednesday. So the Wednesday before that, we have what we call our library jeans day. And if students, and this is K-12, if their library account is clear, all of their books are turned in and all of their fines are paid, they get to wear jeans that day, which is, 95% of the kids, and only the kids that are missing things have to wear their uniforms. And that's a really big incentive for the kids and the parents. And then because of so many field trips and parties, we have jeans for the rest of our school year. So that whole last week, but that first day is specifically for library. So if you have all of your library things turned in, and so then I close the library, I stop circulation 2 weeks before, and I stop classes a week before that, so that I can get my inventory done, because I don't want to find a book in the library and have charged a kid or cost them their jeans day if it's gotten lost, because after school care takes place in our library. And so I can't do anything after school. But that also means that kids are in the library for 3 hours after school every day. So things easily get moved or misplaced, or someone put something on my desk and I didn't know was a book that needed to be checked in, all those little things that happen. So we do stop that early. And that helps a lot with that. But yes, I understand that balance. I get pulled into a lot of our curriculum pieces because of my background in curriculum. So I help coordinate our social studies curriculum because that was my subject area. I help coordinate, we're working on a new social media policy with the technology teacher. And a lot of we're working to try and train parents a little more. And we've had some big issues with TikTok in elementary school. And so that's been okay, we really need to, these parents have no clue what's happening with their children and social media and all of they don't know that so many of the book publishers have an agenda of what they want these kids to learn. And so they don't think about, I should check a review, not just say, Scholastic books were good when I was a kid, so they must be great now. So we're working on a lot of those kind of education pieces, but it's a tough balance. And I just realized that there's things that aren't going to happen. So I have book fair books that, came in October and they have not been processed yet. And it'll happen when it happens.
I think a lot of it is just choosing your priorities. I've kind of gone to finding one area to work on for now, and then just letting the rest go for now. And yeah, because like you said, I have books that I'm halfway done processing and they're sitting on my shelf.
Yep.
And I have no good place to hide them. I really wish I did, but
they're like, can I have that book? Nope, sorry, it's not ready yet.
But see, I have a hard time saying no. So I'm like, give me a minute, I'll cover it a second. So, and they know I give in. So it's a hard one, but yeah. I understand though. You got to say no sometimes. Yeah. Well, if no one else has any questions, it's been a little over an hour already. I just kind of want to give a heads up. Oh, I lost the date. Hold on a sec. I think it's on this document. Yes. We're thinking of doing our next one. May 16 was our most likely thing. So thank you, Christina, for helping with this. It's super helpful for me. I think for everyone else, it probably was too. And just listening to comments, it seems like they really appreciated it. So I appreciate your work. One thing we thought about doing for next time is maybe looking into genres versus sticking with the Dewey Decimal System. I don't know if anyone has switched to genres. I haven't. A lot of my classroom teachers in their classroom libraries have. I see some pros and cons. If you know anyone that has, I'd love to hear that from them. Yeah, so that was one of the suggestions we had, and then maybe some book reviews and suggestions for books. Was there anything else, Tammy? I feel like we talked
It
about something
was,
else.
hold on. Let me look at our Facebook message.
That's where it was, and I don't have that open here. So it'll
I'm
take me a
opening it
little
right
longer.
now. It was, hold on. Dynamic shelving versus regular shelving, like where some of the books are front facing and things like that. So since we talked about collections and policies today, we thought if we kind of wrapped all together Dewey versus genre, what did I call it? Dynamic shelving. And what was the other one you said, Jen?
Like reviews for books and suggestions for books, just kind
Oh
of
yeah,
a time
yeah.
to share some of your latest, newest things. So kind of just more how we organize our library and stuff. Dynamic shelving is like a hot topic, I feel like, in some of the other library groups I'm in. And I think it's neat. I think it really helps kids check out books, but I run out of time. But if I had a volunteer, that's what I would probably get them to do.
And space, but if I weed all of those books that are 8,000 years old, I might have room for some dynamic shelving.
That's
You
what I'm
know,
finding this year is that, oh,
Good.
wait, like if I could do more. Like, I
Yeah.
think I have like over 1,000 biographies. I don't need 1,000 biographies for 250 elementary students, especially when most of them are at a 6th grade reading level. That totally makes sense.
I feel like we have lots of things we can aim for here, like lots of goals. So yeah. So I don't know if anyone has any expertise in any of these areas or know someone. I would love to hear, hear your willingness to help out with it. Otherwise, I'll just research and talk to you, but experience means a lot to me. So yeah. So we're kind of thinking May 16. Let me know if that's not a good day. Like if it is not good for a lot of people, we can look into switching. But yeah, that's kind of where we're thinking. May starts to get crazy for me. So yeah, like right before Tulip Festival, if you're from around here and all that stuff, try to fit that all in. So yeah. Any other thoughts before we go?
I will, both kind of the questions that I worked through or looked at with some resources added to it and a copy of the policy that I'm working from or working on right now. I will put in the shared drive, but also in the Facebook group so that anyone can look at those.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. And there's actually a list of people I've been emailing out to. So I might, if it's okay with you, if I add those on there.
Yeah, that's fine.
send that out
Will
too.
you post the recording in the Facebook group?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
Our high school librarian was like, I can't make it tonight. Can you send it
It's-
to me?
It's on my YouTube channel, but I'll post the
Okay.
link in there.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
And I'm still good for May 16th. I'm good Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays in May, but I'm doing a play, so I am Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday doing the play thing. So
All right. Well, otherwise, I think we're done for the night, and I really appreciate your work, Christina.
perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much
all.
for taking the head of that. All right, I'm gonna stop recording.